Hello and welcome to the Daily Faded. My name is Hetz. This is where we get faded daily, talk about the news and politics of the day. Thank you for joining me here tonight. Today is September 8th, 2020. Yes, I need to look down to check the date because I don't carry the date around in my head. I carry it around on my calendar, on my watch, or in my phone. So I never know what the date is. But yes, today is September 8th, 2020. Yet another September 11th is coming up around the bend. And today we're going to talk about the apocalypse in California and a few other things. But the first thing I wanted to tell you about is something I haven't talked about on the show yet. At least I don't think so. Someone I haven't talked about, and that would be Angelina Dueñas, who I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly. At least I hope I am, given that I have been canvassing and phone banking for her. So here in California's 29th district, which is the San Fernando Valley, the eastern part of the San Fernando Valley, including Pacoima, North Hollywood, Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Van Nuys. We have a congressman named Tony Cardenas, and he's a corporate Democrat, takes big money from, for example, he's taken $500,000 from health insurance companies, and he is opposed to Medicare for all. So I'm very excited that I actually voted for Angelica in the primary because she wasn't Tony Cardenas, but I had not heard anything about her campaign. Now I went and looked it up and wanted to see what was going on with the race. And then I discovered, whoa, we have a wonderful, amazing progressive running right here in California's 29th district. So I was thrilled about that and started looking a little bit deeper and decided that I would volunteer. So I've been making calls and doing what we call socially distanced canvassing, which means just leaving door hangers on people's doors. And if you get a chance to talk to someone from a social distance, then do so and get them to vote for Angelina Dueñas. One thing that is strange to me is that Angelica has not gotten a lot of press in the online left media. I haven't seen her on Humanist Report. I haven't seen her on Jimmy Dore. She has been on Ron Placone's show a few times. But I'd like for this race to be getting the kind of attention that like a Cori Bush or a Jamal Bowman got. We need a higher profile to get more volunteers and more donations to help get this woman elected. So she's for Medicare for all. She's for the Green New Deal. She's for free college. And she takes no corporate PAC money. So, criminal justice reform. So we've got a lot of work to do here in California's 29th, and I'm very excited about it. All right, catching up on where we're at with coronavirus. Tonight I'm smoking LA Confidential. But soon, this curtain right here, see this? It pulls back. Right behind this curtain is going to be my nice, dark, cool, hopefully not too humid spot where I will be hanging my beautiful cannabis plant, probably in a month or so, maybe 2 months. I don't know. It's still got a ways to go, but we cleaned it out and we made a space. So we've got just enough space to hang the plant and dry it. So I'm excited about that. All right. So according to NCOV 2019 live at 4:30 today, worldwide, we're up to 27.7 million cases with around 234,000 new cases today worldwide. Globally, we're at a little over 900,000 deaths with 4,187 deaths being reported today. And that death toll is a little bit lower than what we've been used to because the US death toll is lower than what we've been used to. The U.S. is at 6.5 million cases, with 23,920 new cases today. It would be better if we started averaging around 20,000 or 25,000 rather than 35 to 45,000 as we were. So fingers crossed that that continues. We're at 193,938 deaths, with 404 deaths reported today. And of course, 404 deaths is much better than the 1,000 or so deaths a day that we've been seeing in the last several weeks, the last few weeks, certainly. And then here in California, as we're suffering through climate change and wildfires, we're also suffering through the pandemic, and we're up to 743,737 cases in California, with 2,251 being reported today. At our peak, we were at about 10,000 a day. So that number's really gotten under control here. And in California, we've had 13,813 deaths, 50 of them today. And at California's peak, it was between 100 and 140 deaths a day. So that number has come down as well. All of which, of course, is going to be undermined by the fact that schools across the country have reopened, and we're going to have a bunch of new outbreaks as a result, and the caseloads will start to rise again. Interestingly, I saw that the highest cases per 100,000 people in the country over the last 7 days are in the northern Midwest, so like Minnesota, Iowa, South Dakota, places like that. And they all have schools opening. These states that have the highest incidence of new cases per 100,000 people. So it may be that those states are about to get hit in the way that New York was hit, and then the Sun Belt in California. Well, California's been getting hit the whole way, but the Sun Belt got hit. Is the upper Midwest next? I don't know. Entirely possible. Definitely possible after the Sturgis motorcycle rally or whatever the fuck that is. David Nakamura from Washington Post tweeted today an estimated 267,000 coronavirus infections from August 2nd to September 2nd, or 1/5 of newly reported cases in the United States during that time. 1/5 of newly reported cases during that time, from August 2nd to September 2nd, can be traced back to a South Dakota motorcycle rally, according to a San Diego State University paper. 250,000 cases came out of that motorcycle rally in Sturgis. And the study finds that in places with high numbers of people returning from the Sturgis rally, cases rose by 14.6% in jurisdictions that had weak virus mitigation policies, but just 2.6% in those with stronger mitigation policies. So these events where a lot of people get together are super spreader events. That's just the way it is. Donald Trump's little campaign tour that he's running around in, he was in, I think he was in Jupiter, Florida earlier today. And then I believe he was in Salem, North Carolina. And both times, big crowds. The Florida crowd had almost no masks. The North Carolina has a mask mandate. So there were more masks, a lot of MAGA masks at the second one, but I would not say more than half of the people that I saw in the crowd had masks on. So the other thing that we know is that loud talking or shouting releases more respiratory droplets. And even if you're wearing a mask, if you start shouting, you're going to be forcing respiratory droplets out. So when you get all of these people together in a space and they're all shouting their fool heads off for Trump, a bunch of crazy MAGA heads, they're putting a lot of respiratory droplets out into the air. Enough so that perhaps there's enough that being outside, the advantage of being outside, is lost. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see how well we're able to trace cases back to Trump's super spreader campaign. But now I want to talk about global warming, climate change. I have been remiss in my duties, and I have failed my own priorities, because I have not discussed climate change nearly enough on this show. I could honestly do a live stream where all I talk about is 4 subjects: coronavirus and the economic downturn, the campaign, climate change, and racial justice. If I just stuck to those 4 topics, there's more than enough to do a full live stream every night. But climate change, I noticed this morning as I was reading an LA Times article about the wildfires here in California and our biggest fire season. LA Times, California's biggest fire season may worsen as powerful winds return Tuesday. I was reading this article this morning and I was shocked that there was no mention of climate change. And they were talking about this being the biggest year in California history and this fire and that fire and the other fire. And I think if you're making the point that these are the biggest fires in California's history, you kind of owe it to your readership. You kind of owe it to the public to remind them that this is exactly the kind of change in our weather, in our experiences, in our environmental world. These are exactly these wildfires are exactly what climate scientists have been predicting for a long time. So climate change is active and alive right here in Los Angeles and right here in California. From the LA Times, California's record-breaking fire season could get much worse in the coming days as powerful winds heighten the danger of more blazes while firefighters continue to struggle with destructive conflagrations across the state. Intense Diablo winds are forecast for parts of Northern California this week, with Pacific Gas and Electric Company saying it would shut off power to numerous communities in hopes of avoiding new fires potentially sparked by downed power lines. The shutdowns began Monday night in parts of the North Bay as the winds picked up. More than 120,000 PG&E customers were without power as of Tuesday morning. Well, look, I'm lucky in that I live in Los Angeles, not San Francisco, and we have the Department of Water and Power here, which I believe generates surplus power and sells power to other neighboring grids. So we don't have to worry so much about the power outages down here that they're having in Northern California. But it is no doubt an apocalyptic hellscape here. The sun yesterday morning rising in a red sky, red sun, totally creepy, totally blood moon looking. Well, it's a sun. I guess it's not a blood moon if it's a sun, right? Time to smoke. Here's how I work. When I hear my argument faltering, if I feel my mind slipping, there's only one solution, and that's to smoke some more. So this article didn't mention climate change at all, top to bottom. It's completely irresponsible to write about this subject and not discuss climate change. Because climate change is what's making everything worse. And unless we educate the public and talk about climate change, we're not going to get politicians who will actually solve the problem. And even though Joe Biden has moved considerably on his climate plans from what he was campaigning on in the primary, I'm still not sure that his plan is up to the challenge, up to the task. From the LA Times article, fire activity has been particularly prolific since August 15th, which marked the start of a lightning siege that unleashed thousands of lightning strikes statewide. Since just that date, firefighters have battled more than 900 fires that have burned 1.8 million acres, Gavin Newsom said. 8 people have died during the weeks-long firestorm, and roughly 3,400 structures have been destroyed. This is a challenging year, Newsom said. It's historic in terms of magnitude, scope, and consequence, and it has also required a deep reservoir of resource. Fires are burning from the Sierra to San Diego, and that has resources stretched thin statewide. Nearly 14,000 firefighters are contending with 25 major wildfires, according to CAL FIRE, and the agency has increased staffing in preparation for critical fire weather in multiple areas. I saw that they closed the national parks that are in California. There's 8 of them that they closed. And I'm not sure who they were quoting at the time, but someone at the National Park Service was talking about it and pointed out that they simply do not have enough firefighters to fight all of these fires that are in the national forests. So they have to take their best shot at the fires they can handle and close off the national forests to let some of those fires burn themselves out, the ones that they can't handle. This was from Politico. Gavin Newsom, quote, "I say this lovingly, not as an ideologue, but as someone who prides himself on being open to argument, interested in evidence. But I quite literally have no patience for climate change deniers," Gavin Newsom said. "It's completely inconsistent, that point of view, with the reality on the ground, the facts as we are experiencing them. You may not believe it intellectually, but your own eyes, your own experiences tell a different story." What I wouldn't give to hear this from someone running for president. And again, Biden, when he talks about climate, and he hasn't been talking about it much lately, again, I don't know what to make of Biden because he's backtracked on so many of the policy ideas that he suggested. He's backtracked on the public option. His advisors are now saying they simply want a piece of legislation to expand Obamacare upon entering the White House, and then maybe worry about a public option later, which means never. So Joe Biden in the conferences that the Biden people had with the Bernie people to come up with a compromise on at least a couple of issues. In that process, they changed Joe Biden's net zero emissions date from 2050 to 2035. That was, I don't know, a month and a half ago, quite some time ago. And just recently, I was reading Joe Biden's issues page, and it still said net zero by 2050. So I don't have great faith in Joe Biden. I do believe he'll be better for climate than Trump, so I'll vote for him. But he won't be nearly good enough. I hope he proves me wrong. From the Politico article, the Democratic governor's statement seems to be a determined retort to California critics, President Donald Trump chief among them, who have blamed the state's power outages on its aggressive push to eliminate fossil fuels. Not true. Our power outages have to do with the fact that PG&E is a piece of shit, and that they took all the profits and didn't invest in infrastructure. Trump and others have likewise suggested the state's environmental protections have deterred tree removal and other steps to prevent forest fires. Again, this is just gaslighting. This is completely disingenuous. These are completely disingenuous attacks. You want to know how disingenuous it is? I watched Trump's appearance in Jupiter, Florida today, which was only about 25 minutes long. And no shit, Donald Trump called himself the great environmentalist. He said he's the greatest environmental president since Teddy Roosevelt. And he meant it. Now, in Trump's defense, he did something that was a very politically smart move, and he extended the offshore drilling ban off of the Gulf Coast in Florida. He not only extended the timeline of the ban, he also extended it to cover the east coast of Florida, and I believe Georgia and maybe even South Carolina. Look, that's a good policy. So when Trump is right, I have to give him credit. If I were in his shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. That said, if I were the president, I would probably institute an offshore drilling ban on all American shores because I don't want any more drilling. So, but Trump up there talking about the environment and, oh, I'm so committed to clean air and clean water is what he thinks is environmental policy these days. Not that those things aren't important. Of course they are. But he's ridiculous to say that when, they have cut so many environmental regulations and gutted the EPA. So it's not true that Trump is a fan of clean water or clean air because he doesn't govern that way. Of course, he doesn't govern, but that's another point for another day. So he just looked idiotic and ridiculous up there talking about the environment and never mentioning climate change and saying that Democrats are bad on the environment. And if you want an environmental president, you need to vote for Trump. Absolutely absurd. He was, throughout the entire speech, just pandering to the Florida audience, talking about things like fighting red tide and stuff like that, which, goes to show that Biden being ahead in a lot of Florida polls has got the Trump campaign worried. Biden being ahead in North Carolina has got the Trump campaign worried, hence their trips to Florida and North Carolina today. Plus, and I'm happy to hear it, Biden is finally pivoting to the economy this week. He's going to Michigan and he's going to start discussing his economic plans. And personally, I look forward to watching him discuss them because I want to hear what he emphasizes and what points he hits. In a CNN poll released last week, 49% of registered voters said they trusted Trump more on the economy, while 48% said they trusted Biden more. So that's a 1 point difference. In May, Trump led 54% to 42%. So Joe Biden has narrowed it by 11 points from 12 points down to Trump to 1 point down to Trump. A Quinnipiac University poll released last week found the two candidates tied at 48% on who voters would trust more on the economy. In June, Trump was up by 5 points on the same question. A CBS News YouGov national poll released over the weekend also had Trump leading by just 1 point, 45% to 44%, with registered voters who were asked which candidate would do a better job handling the economy. So this is very bad news for Donald Trump. The fact that people are not trusting him on the economy, that was really the big thing he had going for him. Americans think that Joe Biden is going to handle the coronavirus better. Americans think that Joe Biden is going to handle crime better, despite all of Trump's ridiculous lies about Antifa protesters and all that nonsense. The polling shows that people trust Joe Biden when it comes to crime. And people trust Joe Biden when it comes to the economy. Maybe by the time of the election, people will trust Joe Biden more on the economy. I suspect they might, because a lot of the economic indicators are not going to look good between now and November. So this is all extremely bad for Trump, that his strongest suit is turning against him. When Trump gets out there, and one of his new talking points, well, it's not that new, is that Barack Obama and Joe Biden committed treason somehow when they supposedly spied on the Trump campaign. Now, there's no evidence that Trump or Biden knew about members of Trump's campaign being tapped by the FBI. There's no evidence of that. So it's just a wild and ludicrous claim that he makes. But I don't think the important point is that they didn't do it, because of course they didn't do it. It's just another Trump conspiracy theory. I think the important thing is to hear Trump and what he says, which is he says, if they were Republicans, because the laws somehow don't apply to Democrats. With the Trump Justice Department, the laws don't apply to Democrats. If they were Republicans, he says, they would have already been found guilty 2 years ago, and they'd be serving 50 years in prison. 50 years in prison for treason. Treason, the punishment that is usually associated with the crime of treason is not 50 years in prison. It is death. It is death. And one of the arguments that people who support the continued existence of the death penalty make is that you have to be able to execute terrorists and treasonous people. But I think what Trump is really saying is that Obama and Biden should be put to death. Every time he says they're guilty of treason, he is saying Obama and Biden should be put to death. That is what the penalty for treason is. Forget when he says 50 years. That's a dog whistle. That's a fake. Trump's desperation since this story broke about him calling servicemen and fallen warriors suckers and losers. His desperation since this story broke has been epic, and I have to admit that I've somewhat enjoyed watching some of his tweets and appearances just to see how desperate he is. A little bit of schadenfreude, you know, and by the weekend, Trump appeared more deflated than outraged at the allegations lobbed against him based on conversations he had. It was a relatively quiet weekend at the White House until Trump decided he wanted to hold a Labor Day news conference. Just as aides believed the story was quieting down, Trump accused top Pentagon military leaders of being beholden to defense contractors, an astonishing comment from the president as he's trying to bolster support with those people. Trump had been privately upset that more of the top brass at the Pentagon had not defended him in the wake of the Atlantic story, and some saw this as a response to that. On Tuesday morning, Mark Meadows claimed that Trump wasn't referencing Defense Secretary Mark Esper, a former top lobbyist for Raytheon, or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, when he made the comments, though it's not clear who Trump would have been referencing instead. And apparently Mark Esper and Milley are both on Trump's shit list right now. So they probably are exactly the people that he's talking about. But don't get fooled about Trump. I'm sure you won't. I know you won't. I'm saying that rhetorically. Don't get fooled by Trump. For Trump to call out the military-industrial complex, he actually said military-industrial complex. For Trump to call out the military-industrial complex is the height of hypocrisy, because look at how much he's expanded the Pentagon budget. He has totally given the defense contractors, the so-called defense contractors, I call them the war contractors, he's given the war contractors everything that they could ask for. He thinks he's making invisible planes after all. Now, I will say one thing. So today on Rising on the Hill TV, Sagar and Jetty made an argument that this whole story is a hit job by senior military people who have it out for Donald Trump for one reason or another. Sagar's theory was that Trump's going to get us out of Afghanistan. For some reason, Sagar still believes Trump is going to get us out of Afghanistan. I feel bad for him. He's a smart guy, but really. And that because he's going to get us out of Afghanistan, the powers that be planted this story with Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic to shame Trump and force him to stay in Afghanistan. I don't buy that conspiracy theory. That feels at least one step too far. But what is definitely true is that Jeffrey Goldberg, who wrote this article at The Atlantic, has a very sketchy record when it comes to the military and the military-industrial complex. He argued vociferously for the war in Iraq, publishing articles about Iraq's supposed connection to Al-Qaeda, which never was proven to exist, and in fact never existed at all. He also wrote articles supporting military action against Syria and even Iran. So Jeffrey Goldberg is not a good guy. He is a stenographer for power. He is a stenographer for the military-industrial complex. He is a stenographer for the Pentagon and for the intelligence community. He is not generally someone to be trusted. For me, my decision-making on what I believe in this story simply comes down to what seems most likely. And what seems most likely to me is that Donald Trump called people suckers and losers, called war heroes and veterans. And because we heard him do it to John McCain, and I have no love for John McCain. I think he was a terrible, foul person who was responsible for an awful lot of death by supporting our crazy foreign wars. Anyway, so yeah, Trump calling out the military-industrial complex. That's rich. And then my last story for tonight that I want to talk about here is an article from Politico that set the world on fire. Purity test. Democrats clash over Biden diversity goals. Black Democrats are urging Joe Biden to resist growing pressure from the left to impose an anti-Wall Street purity test on his hiring decisions if elected, warning that it threatens the party's desire to boost diversity in powerful executive branch posts. Come on. Does anyone think that's a good faith argument? Progressives have been calling on Biden to take a hard line in filling out his cabinet, with groups such as Justice Democrats and Sunrise Movement demanding that he pledge to appoint 0 current or former Wall Street executives or corporate lobbyists to his administration. Now, look, this is anathema to everything that the people working for Trump believe in. He's got an organization, a campaign full of lobbyists. Some of the stories, some of the reporting on the lobbyists has been intense. I wish I had complete recall on it all, but I'm stoned. This argument that you can't restrict people from Wall Street from being in the cabinet is, for the sake of identity politics, is ludicrous. It's absolutely asinine, because if you're all about getting them from Wall Street, well, who's not well represented on Wall Street? People of color are not particularly well represented on Wall Street. You expand your pool of people of color massively when you say you're not going to recruit from Wall Street. You're going to recruit from the rest of the world. There's plenty of people of color you can choose from for your cabinet positions. So this is fake identity politics. This is the same kind of fake identity politics that mainstream and corporate Dems do all of the time. Whether it's bringing on a body language expert onto MSNBC, well, I won't talk about that right now. I hate when Joe Biden says that. Hold on one sec. Continuing in the Politico article, but Black Democrats on Capitol Hill and on K Street say that that's in direct conflict with the party's overarching diversity goals and would keep many people of color, including those with ties to the financial world, from ascending to key positions long dominated by white males. We've got to fix all the problems that were created over the last 4 years, said Representative Gregory Meeks, a senior lawmaker on the House Financial Services Committee and a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. We're going to need every hand on deck. He's a lawmaker on the House Financial Services Committee. He should be the first one to say that we don't want any Wall Street people or corporate lobbyists in the cabinet. He's on the fucking House Financial Services Committee. He is supposed to oversee financial services. He oversees Wall Street. He should be the most powerful voice. He should be the most powerful voice in the country. I believe Maxine Waters is the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. I think it's Maxine Waters. Let me not say, because I don't want to defame someone who I'm getting wrong. But I remember reading that the chair of that committee takes a ton of bank money. That is fucked up. That is a system that cannot self-correct, a system that cannot course correct. Can't do anything when the money has the power. Quote, we have seen the effects of corporate control over the American government for our entire lives. It has blocked universal access to healthcare, real action on the climate crisis, and started endless wars that waste taxpayer dollars we need to invest in schools and jobs, said Emily Meyer, political director of If Not Now, one of the groups trying to discourage Biden from appointing executives and lobbyists. We reject the false choice between having the people leading our country represent the diversity of our nation and removing corporate control from our politics. And Emily Mayer is damned right in what she said. Any black candidate who comes from Wall Street is going to be working in the interests of Wall Street. That's what happens. It warps your mind. All you care about is the bottom line, is the profit motive. That's all they care about. So what good is the representation if the representation won't represent? The majority of Americans don't own stock. I believe only 17% of Americans own stock. Most people are simply victims of the over-financialization of our economy. And that includes black people. So what kind of representation do average, ordinary black Americans get from some Wall Street guy who happens to be black? He doesn't represent their interests. So to make this diversity argument is absurd. And the reason it's absurd is because the reason Democrats can make arguments like this is because they detach class politics from identity politics, right? So it doesn't matter that Barack Obama did, and I'm reporting this from black progressive friends that I have, that Barack Obama didn't do anything for black people. He just, I mean, it was huge. He did something huge by becoming president, and that's great. But look, one of the problems in Michigan in 2016 was that black males did not turn out in 2016, the way they had in 2008 and 2012. They turned out for Obama. They didn't turn out for Hillary. And the reason they didn't turn out was because they didn't believe they were going to get anything out of it. Maybe I'm oversimplifying. People have a lot of different motivations for voting or not voting the way that they choose to. But I don't believe that Barack Obama made any of the kind of progress that the black community needs. Yes, again, we can never say enough about first black president. Really important, really great. I cried when I voted for him. But what did he actually do for urban communities, for example? What did he do about the black maternal death rate? What did he do about it? I didn't hear him do anything about it. Obamacare didn't take care of it. We still have a ridiculously high black maternal death rate. So where was Obama on that? I think he might have done some good things for HBCUs, so that's good. But Wall Street representation is not what black Americans need. Far be it from me to tell black Americans what they need. So I'll refer to Cori Bush, who tweeted, "Not this black Democrat. We don't just want black leaders. We want black leaders who will actually bring the change our communities need, not just do the bidding of Wall Street." And Jamal Bowman tweeted, "Who, me? This black Democrat is urging Biden to do the opposite. We need less Wall Street in the next administration and more working class representation." So black progressives get it. They understand. And they know this is bullshit. They know this is bullshit. And it's the kind of the meaningless identity politics that the Democrats play, where, oh, look, we have a woman who was in the CIA. Does that actually mean anything to anyone? Does that affect anybody's life? Having a representative who was in the CIA? No, of course not. Of course not. It's ridiculous. That doesn't improve anyone's material conditions. So there you have it. I thought this brouhaha from the Politico article was interesting. And I'm with Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. Thank you very much. This has been the Daily Faded. Please hit subscribe and like and hit that bell for notifications. And I will be back again tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Pacific.